Woohoo!
Hello, Jack.
Welcome to the second night of PC sessions. Tonight we're doing CISO and the risk management track. And over to you, Dennis.
Yeah, let me share my screen. And I should be able to see my slides. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, we can see it.
So what we're going to do is so this session it's all about trying to figure out what is the best way for us to make the summit a success. So a couple of you, I think Tony, you were involved a bit on the sausage factory that happens before the summit. I think
Yeah.
the thing that I would say, I think this is very important. For me, the North has always been what is the best session that we can do for the participants. And the idea is always that you find topics that are very exciting and very interesting, or somebody cares about, and then you find talent that cares about that. And it's sort of like creating this attraction so that we get maximum amount of talent in one place. And then you sort of know that serendipity and magic will happen because, every time you get passionate people that care about one topic in one place, talking about that one topic, there's always great stuff that happens. And then all the other side effects of, having people collaborate, people learning, people with lots of experience, helping people without a lot of experience, but actually sometimes the new joiners actually providing really good feedback and really, good, valuable information and comments. And I guess my favorite part is the intersection between the multiple disciplines, where you get this really amazing sort of group knowledge, wisdom of the crowds, because you do get, not just one perspective or one group of individuals that tend to think the same way. So, and I guess the key element is that all the sessions are up for grabs. This is a bit of a Darwinian approach. And I think this year we can actually use less of the force than the last years, because, it was always the case of trying to understand and see where the center of gravity for the sessions. But I think this year, because we're going to use Hey Summit, we can be a bit more brutal on the sessions. So the idea is that if you come up with a session and there's people that want to do it, we'll put on the main schedule. If there's not enough people that want to do it, then it won't be on the main schedule. Although the nice thing of the virtual world is we can scale, we can provide Zoom sessions, you can provide all sorts of environments for people to do it. But for the ones on the main schedule, they are the ones that, create more energy, but also people are more interested in. And this actually means that you can go on some tangent topics that you are really passionate about, that you might find that there's other 10, 20, 30 people that are really passionate about the same thing. And everything is recorded, everything is Creative Commons, everything is open source. And then we also have, and I think we're going to publish quite a very strong ethics and rules of engagement. So we make sure that it's very friendly and we respect everybody. And that's kind of the idea. But the key concept is that this is the moment that we get to define the session. So no idea is too insane. It's all about momentum. If you have a good idea, put it out there, and then we'll see, how many people wants to join, right? So yeah, so we're going to talk about the CISO and risk management. So I think that's the key topics of today. So a very quick intro. I think some of you have been there, right? A place where the best security minds come to collaborate. We solve hard problems. You got that intersection between security experts, developers, users, government agencies. I think one of my favorite comments was, it's like the NATO, but it actually works. People actually collaborate. And then, it's where you actually find like-minded individuals that care about something that you are passionate about. And, it's also, we try to maximize for synergies and collaboration. And that's the Open Security Summit. It's actually the 6th edition. Some of you have been to some of these. This is where it all started from the OWASP summits. Then it kind of evolved to the Open Security Summit, which of course still a massive OWASP participation. And now, it's all remote this year. We're going to work together. It's going to be interesting to see what photos we can do. Maybe for next year, just have a bunch of Zoom photos, right? Of everybody there collaborating. We did try to create as many outcomes as we can. The idea is that we're working together. We try to really, create something that you get that pool of people in the same place. We got some great feedback from the participants on the last ones. I have to say, for me, this is still, it still will be my favorite event of the year, because I actually get to collaborate and learn a lot. And the way it works is we have this concept of working sessions where it's basically, it's all about, you know, a couple of experts, a couple of practitioners collaborating, putting ideas, you know, trying to figure out something, bringing a problem to the table and saying, hey, how do we address this? And of course, the more pre-work you do, the better it becomes, but it's all about, you know, working together on something. We sort of also have, you know, the idea that for some more practical, it becomes more of a kind of a user session where it's all about hands-on. It's all about, you know, basically you trying new things. And it's all, you know, the key concept is always like, this is not a one-to-many. This is a many-to-many. This is all about collaboration. It's all about working together. So we kind of broke it into these sort of three roles: organizer, practitioners, and participants, although we want the participants to participate as much as they can. But the idea is that the organizers, you know, get the sessions, run it, creates the content, and then you got a bunch of practitioners who also are actively involved, and then, you know, the people are all participants. But we want to have as many organizers in a way and practitioners as possible, because that's what makes it super valuable. So everybody basically should be creating sessions about stuff that you care about, you know, and that's what happens, right? The summit is about you. It's about what you care about, the topics that you really want to, you know, pick somebody else's brain or trying to solve about it, and also things that you want to learn, right? So in a way, you know, you'll see that there's a lot of sessions that I add to the schedule because are things that I'm interested in, right? And that's how it should be. And what I found is, I found again on the Darwinian approach, the more you do it, the better the sessions become, and then, you know, they're the ones who happen to go live. So 100% online. We're going to use Hey Summit for the process, for the workflows and the user management, and session, and Zoom for all the sessions. In terms of how we broke the schedule, to try to make it simple and also have a certain cadence, and also to allow it to scale if needed to other time zones, we kind of come up with this concept where really what we have is 2 hours break, and then 2 hour session, 1 hour break, 2 hour session, 1 hour break, you know, all the way. So you got maybe an introduction at 10:30, but then everything starts from 11 to 1, first session, then we break, then 2 to 4, then 5 to 7, and then 8 to 10. And some, you know, we might actually also try to do a couple of social events at night. And I think that some of these might go a bit longer or sooner, depends on the time zone, because we can really cater for a global sort of event, right? And also these allow some of the sessions to run over a little bit if needed. So really what we want to do here, you know, today is to figure out what could be the first 4 or 8 sessions that we want to do around the CISO track, and, you know, basically the some CISO topics and around risk management topics. You know, there's a bunch of already draft sort of sessions and tracks that we are trying to create. We had a great session on Worldly Maps yesterday. By the way, Simon has confirmed he's going to be with us Monday and Tuesday. So I highly recommend, you know, especially some of the sessions that he's driving. So that's really good. And I guess, Jane, we could see which days you could commit, or some hours you could commit, so we can also make sure we have some sessions.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you look at your schedule and let us know,
yeah,
right? And because I think there's some sessions we should do around some of the topics that you're super passionate about, right? And
yeah,
you know, it should be, you know, a session with you, and you should be driving some of those, right? But it also helps a lot to put it on a schedule, so we can say, like, so if you can come to us and says, look, you know, Wednesday afternoon or Monday morning or you know, Thursday, whatever, that suits your schedule.
Yeah,
we, you know, we can work around.
Yeah, I can do that, definitely. Yeah, it'd be fun.
Cool. So, you know, okay, yeah, so we're going to do is we kind of charging the summit tickets, because, you know, there's a bunch of costs that we have to run. There's not as insane costs as the center parks, but, you know, I actually want to get also ideally even sort of like some of the technical writers and other people to help, but we'd also have, you know, already a couple of Zoom and other costs. But the good news is that if you know anybody that, you know, can buy this or needs a ticket, you know, we already got a nice sponsor from Glasswall, which basically has a ton of tickets, because we were, you know, platinum sponsor for this year. So we get as many tickets as we kind of can distribute. So if you guys know anybody who needs a ticket, you know, we'll give it to them. And my priority is always to get as many people to the summit as possible. So now is the time to define the topics for the working sessions that we'll be working on. And we got some ideas, right? So we got some ideas to throw in here. So, you know, we can kind of open up the discussion. And actually, the key concept that I really want everybody to think about is, you know, we're going to have some world expert CISOs, right, in the same virtual room, and they all focus on collaboration. So what, in a way, should they be working on? And then when you look at risk management, we're going to again have some of the world experts of risk management in the same room. What should they work on, right? So that's really, you know, the key concepts. So this is just some ideas, right? So one of the things I've and I'm actually quite keen on the first one, which is, where are the areas that the CISOs and the security team can actually add value to the business? And this was actually a session I was supposed to do in one of the breakfasts, but it kind of got canceled when the whole thing got shut down. But I really like this idea that we can map lots and lots of examples where, basically CISOs and the security has actually added value and actually has contributed to the top and the bottom line of companies. And when you look at it, there's lots of those, but I don't think we have captured that very effectively. So that's one. I think there's a lot of great work we can do as cyber risk modeling. Third-party assurance definitely is actually already a pain that I'm dealing quite every day. So I'm very keen to figure out ways to scale. And team topologies is from a book that has, I don't know if you know the book, but it's quite an amazing way also to think about it. And when you add that to worldly maps and the PST and squads, it solves a lot of other problems. So I think that's another really powerful topic. But kind of I open up to you, right? I think you all panelists at the moment, so you please chip in, right? You could all share your screen and your camera, and what I like us to work on now is what are the topics that we should be working on those 2-hour blocks.
So Dennis, it's Phil here.
Hey, Phil.
I've got one which is nobody knows what a CISO is.
Okay.
Everybody's
That's a lovely topic.
So let's
call it who is the CISO?
There you go.
Or you can do that for 2 hours? We can go everybody go, hello.
2 hours won't be enough to finish the argument.
Yeah. Based on the amount of organizations I've dealt with over the years, it can range from a security manager to boards, stalking horse, straw man. There's all sorts.
So what would be interesting is something that would be to the effect of what defines a CISO. What's the definition of a CISO? And then break
we did that. We could revisit, because we did look at the attributes and components of what a CISO is in the Open Security Summit 2017 or 18, I can't remember.
Phil,
we could turn it into a mind map, so you can mind map that out again. It's evolved, hasn't it, since 2018?
Phil, just picking up on something you said on Twitter, this whole competency thing, that might be quite interesting to have a session on. I mean, it could be built into that or it could be separate, but it's just like measuring competency. How would you measure that? Because I've no idea actually how you could measure competency, but it'd be a great one to do.
I think I responded to that one as well.
Oh, did you? I haven't checked.
Try about maturity. Measuring maturity seems to be about people's opinions on a made up scale, whereas competency should be sort of a bit more empirical.
I think there's also something around not just what a CISO does, but how a CISO, and it kind of relates a little bit to team topologies, but how a CISO sits in an organization. Because the other side to it is there's a complete variety of who they report to, what they do, what the expectations are, all the rest of it.
So that's an interesting one, because actually we were having this discussion around first, second and third line of defense, and it created a number of dialogues. So, first, second and third line of defense can come across quite, quote unquote old school, but, what is the modern CISO? Where is the modern information security function? Where does it sit? Is it a blend? Is it a combination of all three? Is it one of those? It's just an interesting dialogue, because I think everyone has different interpretations of what would help you be most efficient. And that aligns to what you're talking about. Where does the CISO sit? Do they sit at the top? Do they sit in the middle? Do they sit at the bottom? What does that look like?
Maybe.
Sorry?
Do you need two CISO? One technical one.
Yeah.
No.
To me,
you can only have one chief.
To me, I think it's interesting if you look at it from a kind of signals perspective. It's just like when you're going for work, positions, new jobs and things like that, something like that is really interesting, because it's just like, what are the questions that you might have to ask in order to give yourself more assurance that you are going into a job an environment that actually is going to support you as opposed to not support you. So it's almost like knowing where should a CISO sit and things like that is all fine if you can affect it. Yeah. But if you can't, then it's almost like it's just theory almost, or wishful thinking. So for me, it's just like having something useful, a useful output, so that, you know, here we go, these are the things that you're looking for. And then also we can start to affect those who are hiring CISOs.
Yeah.
So I think there's a map of attributes in terms of their context, their activities, their skills, which are going to be different for every CISO in every organization. But I think by mapping those attributes, we can be clear on what sort of CISO somebody is. And again, it helps, like you say, with going into a role, how do I find out what sort of CISO they want me to be?
Yeah. But also what you want to be too. It's just do you know what I mean? So it's actually, yeah, you know, I'm retiring, so I want an easy life, or yeah, I want a challenge, or yeah, you know, I think that's really, really valuable output. You know, mapping that, it's just like, well, okay, you figure in this, so it's not just a case of like ideal scenario, but what is it that you want? Where if you go for something like this, then you're going to be able, potentially, if we map the competencies and the abilities and the support to do X, Y, and Z, to really make an impact in a positive way.
There's also a sense that some people are not well suited for a CISO role with one set of expectations in one organization, whereas they may be perfectly suited for a role in a different organization. And I think that's where the attributes, both in terms of the role, but also in terms of the individual, comes from.
Is there a joint thing around like the kind of the typical journey that some organizations go on in how the sort of CISO that they're looking for and kind of where they report? And like you say, there's a whole gamut of kind of from head of InfoSec, or kind of you know, someone who's come out of you know, being an IT security person, right the way through to being you know, much more well, Phil, I suppose using you as an example, towards the other end of the spectrum about being risk management and kind of a very different line of defense. Is there
old and grey, I think, is what you're looking for?
Well,
yeah, so can
distinguished.
Can you see my screen? Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
So I was able to dig it. You know, it is quite interesting because, you know, that was some really good sessions that we had, you know, Phil, you know, and I think Tony were there too, the first year, right? And almost what we did, so we kind of went around, and I think one of the things we've done was also try to create that maturity model, right? Where we kind of try to say, this is the kind of stuff that should happen, and the idea would be that you start to map out the, you know, how mature almost in organization the CISO position is. Because what you have today is you have a lot of places, you have people that are CISO but in name, right? So they might be called head of InfoSec or might be called this, but they haven't given the mandate. And I think what we were trying to come up with was almost like a maturity model to say, hey, you as a company, in fact, I want that for my suppliers, right? You know, I want to understand where's the security sit in the priorities, right? So we can basically have a very set of questions, a very quick set of almost entries on a maturity model, so we can say, you know, is this organization where it is, right? Where it is on that maturity, so, and where is on that investment.
Yeah, and how good a fit it is for someone of this ability and level. So if you've got a new CISO coming in with experience in X, Y, and Z, then fine, you know, they're not going to be, it's going to be carnage if they go into that type of role, even if they do get the job.
Yep.
There's also a highly contextual, right? And different industries tend to treat some of those roles in different ways.
Well, but then we get data, right?
Yep.
Then we could say, you know, here's data, here's, you know, multiple industries, and we can say that on this industry there is this gap. And actually, one of the key questions I always get asked from a CISO point of view is, what are the competitors doing, right? They always want to compare you with your peers, right?
Yeah. So the question would be,
questions both for the CISO and for the organization would be a step forward.
Yeah.
Sorry, Phil? What was that?
Sorry, even just a set of questions around context, activities, and capabilities, both for the candidate and the business. Just that set of questions defined would be a step forward.
I completely agree. It would be really, really useful.
Yeah, and the other one is this one. Have you seen this, right? The five questions from the National Security Cyber Center. Right?
Oh my God, yes, I have. I mean, that was a joke. I'm sorry, but
yeah, but it's the beginning, right? So hey, we get an opportunity to do better, right?
yeah, I mean that would be great actually to look at. You know, what are the things that really we do need to be asking?
I don't know if you know the book CISO Compass by Todd Fitzgerald, but it has an actual chapter all on different reporting lines for the CISO and what it means to a few different industries. It's a really good book. It's a place that I usually start thinking about the subject.
I think it's one of the things that's probably most, unfortunately, certainly in the UK, I think in the US, they've got a little bit more grip on it because they've got mandations, say, for example, New York Financial Acts and things like that, which insists upon a CISO that reports to the board, you know, or sits on the board and things like that. Whereas in the UK, there's organisations that put a title CISO but don't, you know, it's not, certainly not a C-suite position, even though it's got a C in it. And you can only tell this by the sort of when you look at job ads and stuff like that. If it, you know, says the person's got to be able to.
But we can push this as an industry, right?
Program a, you know, firewall, then you know.
Yeah.
For me, it's also interesting to see that many organizations are moving towards the convergence of information security with physical and other security as well. So there are roles of CSOs instead of CISOs. So what difference does it make with convergence and without convergence?
So that's a good call, but I think so far we're missing what the employer wants, i.e. what the business that the CISO is going to work to. And I think that's key because that frames very often the reporting line. It also frames very often their degree of control over the budget. Because in my experience, too many CISOs don't actually control their budget. They have to ask their CIO to spend most of the time. They have to ask permission to spend.
Yeah.
Yep, that's true.
Well,
Most
there's
of
an
the time,
interesting piece around the CIO as well, because the CIO is the other famous board level C-suite role that doesn't actually have a seat at the board. And there is something to be learned there from how they failed to get onto the board and how we also are failing.
I think that's a good one, Phil, and you know, and also recognise the difference between you might be on the board, but do you have a vote? And there's a difference there too.
So are we kind of converging on the idea that what we want is to create like a CISO maturity model, where we can measure how mature the CISO and you know, role is, but also the mandate that it has on the company.
How about a CISO
if I may, I
model?
think, Phil, can I draw you in? I think there's probably, and forgive me, I'm going to cross fields here. I suspect there's probably a Wardley map opportunity between maturity of an organisation and competency of the CISO.
Yes, I agree with that, Alan. I do.
I certainly think there's a crossover there. And I'd also, Denise, I challenge every company needs a CISO, because I don't think they do. I think for many outfits, small to medium, but not just size-based, they don't necessarily need a CISO, because they've actually got a pretty straightforward IT outfit. That's not really where a CISO comes into it. A CISO is where you're engineering change, more so than where you're doing business as usual. And again, I think that relates to the maturity, but that, I mean, I spent a lot of time in financial services, and that changed the bank as opposed to run the bank. I've seen the CISO very actively involved in the change the bank side, and then number two looks after the run the bank.
And, it's very counterproductive to have a proper maturity model for a CISO in that sense, because for me it's a very philosophical question of a role with a lot of thought leadership and other things involved in the whole role itself, for it to be written into a proper maturity model, and it's a philosophical question at that point of view.
Yeah, but that's why if you can look at it from an organization and have some output, as in these are things to look at for you moving into your next CISO role, however mature you are, then that's really useful for CISOs.
I do want to jump in a little bit, and this is just driving me nuts. I really hate the term maturity, because it implies some sort of pedagogical progress, that you get to be a better CISO as you slowly move up the ranks. Nah. So what I'm interested in are context and characteristics, and the questions that can tell you if you've got the right context and the right characteristics. So I'm not interested. So
building on that then, Phil, do you think
completely
that
agree.
Actually this is around trying to flesh out maybe 5 or 6 personas for different types of CISO that are relevant to, that captures the kind of the background that they've come from, the skills or the competencies that they've got, the sorts of organization that they might be found in, and that's useful for both individuals trying to plot out from a career perspective, but also useful for employers who kind of go, I recognize our organization in that kind of persona. That's the sort of person that we need.
Yeah.
Yeah, potentially.
I was going to say, you do get different types of CISOs work better with different types of organizations, and to drag in the old sort of pioneer settlers and town planners structures.
Yeah.
You know, a CISO who works very well in, you know, the fast-moving tech space is very different to a CISO who works in a large international conglomerates, where, you know, basically compliance drives everything.
But also with that, you can probably spot, you know, in terms of career development and things like that, you can probably spot gaps, you know, so where you need an injection of development, you know, so from a career development perspective, it's just like, well, here's my aspiration. I'd like to go into that role in that type of organization when it is mapped out, which might be too ambitious for the 2 hours, but that would be incredibly useful. You know, so it's bringing in that element as well.
Or even just understanding what your own strengths and how you know, where you want to play, and then, you know, to look at those types of organizations rather than, you know, go for a job, maybe, you know, get it, end up in an organization, go, hell, I didn't realize it was, you know, like this.
Exactly.
So remember that a lot of this is we can work towards the summit, right? So think again, the summit actually as a summit, right? The peak of energy, right? So, you know, the best working sessions also historically have been the ones that the more preparation we do beforehand, the better the outcome is. And I would also add to the mix that one of the things that we're super privileged is that we have access to a massive network. So if you think about it, we actually have the ability to really test these hypotheses, right? And to validate this, because even on this call, look at the amount of experience that we have here. And this is a very small subset of even the network that even each of us personally has access to, that covers from executives to management, to teams, to CISOs, to wannabe CISOs, to CISOs that are just by the name. So we actually can think that, you know, we can create a lot of content that we can reach out and ask for opinions and get validation. And then in a way, use the summit almost as the pinnacle of that moment where we kind of finally come together and put all the pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So are we saying that, okay, so one of the topics, CISO personas, I really like that. To define 5 or 6 CISO personas that, you know, we can use, like, have you seen those things where you create like the user persona from a web point of view, where you describe who the user is, who the client, what they like? So we're using that very effectively. It's really cool, right? So we have like, this person is our target audience, you know, he has knowledge in this, he's using these tools, he has his experience, he has his background, he has these elements. So I think we'll be each thing. And I guess this covers those, you know, when you're saying that, you know, not everybody needs a CISO, that's fine. So maybe one of these personas is not a CISO, right? Is the next evolution, or the one that is in a company that doesn't need a CISO, just needs somebody who is responsible for security.
I think that's the crucial bit for me, is it doesn't kind of put them in a, if you think maturity, it kind of instinctively people try to put them on a ladder and say, I must get from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. Whereas I can't remember who it was that was making the point, you know, depending on where you are in your career, you might want to an easier life, or you might be looking for something else, or you might excel technically, but not want any, you know, to get involved in the business side of things. I think that works quite well.
Yeah.
But if you go to Worldly Maps, this is a good example of those individuals should be on a town planner organization, right? They should be where boring is good, where everything is supposed to be really well defined. You don't want a lot of change. It's all about execution. You don't want one of those individuals in a pioneer company that is growing spectacularly, right? That is changing everything, that is pushing to production like there's no tomorrow, right? And it's who needs a complete different personality, right?
Yeah.
That's a different channel. The Dennis, in the Slack channel for OSS, in the CISO channel, I dropped a graphic from my sales structures mammoth, which looks at some security functions measured in or against planners, settlers and town planners, sorry, pioneers, and the sort of different types of functions from management, etc.
Yeah, can you guys see it?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, obviously, you know, this doesn't go up to CISO level, but we can kind of almost create a variation around those sort of functions. This is just something I threw together a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Which you still need to publish, Tony.
I know. I'm still working on it, just very slowly.
Just publish it. It's Creative Commons, man.
Tony, if you don't want to publish it yourself, the ISF, Mark Ward at the ISF, is doing something that would take that and publish it for you.
I might drop it into ISS as something that
send it to me and I'll publish it, man.
Do you
with attribution, of course.
Of course, right? There you go.
I tell you what would also be really useful is to come up. Did anyone see T Patel? He did a video, not his last one. He did one on all the different standards to actually come up with a solution. Yeah, I mean, it's just like, it's ridiculous, but to actually try and come up with a solution, it's just an idea of how we tackle that. It might be, a losing battle because many businesses that are wrapped around it and invested parties and things like that. But it's just like, moving forward, it's ridiculous the amount of standards that we have to use. What is the alternative? It's almost like, to me, it's almost like a bit of a hackathon. It's just like creating some useful output that actually helps us to evolve.
So I think that's a great another topic rather than just the one.
Oh, me too. It's a completely different topic.
Yeah. Well, that goes to the heart of something I care about, which is it has to all be a gigantic graph, right? And eventually a map, right? Because you have to hyperlink everything. Right?
I'd like to get the artists in. I want to get the artists sketching all these things, making those. I can't think what you call them now.
Yeah, we did that one year. We actually got 1 year.
2018.
Yeah, the guy that creates some really cool stuff, right? On this.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. Look, okay, here you go. You guys, you get me some sponsors for the summit, and I'll hire some artists, right, to do those sketches in real time.
Yeah.
So cool. I think I actually feel that that is one of the topics I actually want to cover, which is to look at how you normalize a lot of these standards, right, and look at how you publish. Because look, that's the problem that we're having now. Like we're about to launch a cloud platform, right? And I actually want to so we already open source all our policies, which it's actually another session I think we should have, right, on open source policies.
Yeah.
Because I think that, again, the summit is a really great place for people to come and collaborate and share, right? The stuff they have.
The Ministry of Justice did that a couple of years ago. They open sourced all their security policies.
Yeah, because that becomes a really great set, right, of guidance, right? That becomes a great toolkit that for new CISOs coming along, if you have an open source policies, you have open source structures, how to think about how the team is structured and what kind of stuff they're doing, those are resources that are super valuable for them.
Does that give us an opportunity to talk diversity as well? And I don't just mean gender, I mean diversity of personality on the CISO team.
Yeah. So we should be able to cover that on the personas now, or you want to tackle that directly?
I think so, because one of those soft skills is how to build and develop a team. That's one of the things I would look for in a CISO or in an organization that I was going into.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So we're putting that into the first session, which is quite a big list of things to discuss already. So I think it might take like 2-3 sessions just to talk about what is CISO, what is required of them, what do they look like, where do they sit, attributes and everything.
And by the way, we can create, like, the idea is that between now and the summit, we should be also start to break out into specific topics. So, you know, one of the things that we need to figure out, maybe we're using Doodle or something, is that once you have a group that's really passionate about a particular topic, you know, we can set up all those sessions, and then, you know, you can do it yourselves, right? So, so some of these actually, I think, require a number of topics and sessions before we hit the summit.
And who are our SMEs who's going to be there for these sessions? Who wants to be involved? And which day? We initially have in mind Wednesday and Thursday for the CISO and risk management. And
so the only thing I was going to say is I'm happy to be involved, but if I'm going to be in multiple sessions, if they're going to be back to back, that's going to be awkward. It'd be useful to have time in between.
Yeah, Phil, that's why we did that thing where you have 2 hours, 1 hour, 2 hours, 1 hour, and that's just consistent.
The 1 hours are breaks.
Yeah, 1 hour is break, by the way.
I know, but if I'm going to run, say, 2 sessions, an hour, I'd probably want to do them on different days if I could.
Yeah, of course. So actually, Phil, while we are on you, I really would like to explore that framework you published. Although I know it's 5 letters, open something RU.
Open Information Security Risk Universe.
We do need to get a better name for that. But
in the modern risk stuff he did a few weeks ago for someone else, would be great to have a run at the OSS.
And actually, Ben, if you guys know Ben Schofield, right? Like the guy who showed me the other day, I'm still nudging him to open source it, but he actually did a lot of those mappings, which actually goes to what Jane was saying, is that unified framework, right? But Phil, I think your framework is brilliant, and I think we should really explore it. You know, I actually would, you know, Petra.
The nice thing is it's open, so I want to, you know, if we can make it better, if we can change it, if we can improve it, done, you know.
So Petra, you're on the call, right?
Yeah, hello.
Can you share your screen? I'm the only one sharing the screen. I feel alone here.
I can.
Tony's sharing it, isn't he?
I cannot stop my video.
None of us can share videos.
Oh no, you can't share video.
I cannot stop my video because no, no, we cannot.
Yeah,
because the host stopped it.
Hosts locked it down, you know.
I think there's a wetware issue.
Let's talk to the host.
Just in case you want to share porn.
Changed it now. We should all be
Easy target.
There you go. Oh, that's better.
Why did I say it before?
Yes.
Oh my God.
It is. I have to say that I found it really weird now to be in that Zoom session when you don't see the people. It's like, you know, there's a human element when you can actually see the individuals, right? So
yeah.
I love the fact that David's had to do this from his car.
I'm late. I've just dropped the kids off. So yeah, sorry, I'm like 45 minutes late.
Hey David.
That's all right.
Really good.
I think this is the power of actually the virtual, right? Like we get access to a talent pool that before was not available, right? It's actually brilliant. So 100%. Petra, my nudge here would be, I think you can work with Phil. So there it is. There's Phil, right? Is the guy who's actually already on our Slack channel, but
Where's
he's
Phil?
Phil Huggins. One there.
There he is.
He's the one that created that framework that we're trying to use, and it's very graph friendly, right? Because it's almost like he defines this happens and then that happens and causes this and causes that and has this risk and has this consequence, which is great. And actually, I feel maybe Phil, my recommendation would be for us to try to come up with really good recipes, right? Really good examples that we can then all work together and say that makes sense, that doesn't make sense. And I would say Petra is almost a great example, right? She's a super new joiner on the InfoSec industry, right? She's kicking out of the park, right? She's a rock star, but she, she has 100 questions, right? But also she's somebody that if we give her a good roadmap, she runs with it, right? So which is brilliant. But what I don't have, for example, is good roadmaps for her. I still feel that most of the stuff that I have in security is more art than science. Where what I want is to, to give her playbooks, to give her examples, to give her a skill change, to give her, good examples of how to think and how to kind of map things up, so then she can run with it. So my benchmark, if Petra can do it, it's on a good spot. Not to put you on a spot, Petra.
Cool. Yeah, that's fine. I'm taking it. Yeah. I'm up for it. I'll talk to Phil and we'll see what we can do.
What do you guys want to name it?
Yeah, what's the name of
Say again?
There's a thing I've built, so we could, if we call it after that, and then I'll run it as an intro, and then we can do a sort of working session, how to use it, how to improve it, how maybe somebody might want to implement it, that sort of thing.
Is that the information security risk universe you mentioned, or is this something?
Yeah, that one.
Phil, I'm actually having to go to my Slack to try to find the link to that thing. There we go. Oh, I got it. Is this thing here?
You've got to work for quality, Dennis.
Here it is.
Because it's OIS and you instinctively want it to start OS.
I must admit, I did suggest it was called Osiris.
So yeah, so here it is, right? You guys can see my screen, right?
Oh, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, you can see my screen, correct?
Mm.
Yep. Yeah, so this is really good, right? It's my favorite part here, which you'll see, right, is when he talks about where is the bit is the events. Where do you have that? This happens and then that happens.
The bow tie diagrams.
Yeah, no, where is it? On your descriptions. It should be on this document, right? But maybe not. It's when you actually have the descriptions. I think it's events, right? Where this leads to this, leads to that. No, maybe not. Where do I find that?
Sorry, I keep forgetting to unmute. The how to use section has the bow ties, which is like the visual display.
I think it's in the supporting chapter.
Supporting chapter. Yeah, this is exactly, and the reason I love this is because you can see these matches where we use JIRA very well, right? Because, but you can see, right, it's a graph, right? There's the risk that X causes Y leads to Z that causes this. Now, the only problem here now, you can't reuse that, man, because, it's kind of like you want it very sequence. But you can see, right, this is amazing because then as a graph, so what we kind of need now is a number of real world examples, right? And again, Petra, from my point of view, you know where my lines are from a CISO point of view in security, right? As long as it doesn't have customer data, doesn't have employee data, right? And doesn't have the source code of the main engine, you can share it, right? So we can bring real data, right? We can actually bring our own situations and then use other people to actually provide real examples and real playbooks. And that would be a great outcome of it.
One thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to say this in the politest way possible, not everyone uses JIRA. So
I know.
If we're going to create graph representations.
No, you're breaking his heart.
No, we'll make a graph neutral representation. Actually, to be honest, like I was actually working on another project where we're using YML files to create graphs, and that was absolutely brilliant, right? And then it's the same structure, right? Basically, the point is A links to B, right? And A and B are nodes on an edge, and the middle bit is the link type, right? So, but I feel that if we can create a number of graphs, then going back to the point, we can make them into maps, because then we can apply the maturity or the evolution of those maps, right? So I think we got another very cool session, right? So another session is the...
Phil, that's some of where I was trying to expand on these in as an actual site rather than a book. where they would link, you'd be able to click between them.
Yeah, it has to be a graph, because if you don't put it in a graph, it doesn't scale, right? And because it's actually is the detail that matters, right? Is when you get to the detail, and if your details are relevant to the business, it makes sense, right? Then it's applicable on your day-to-day.
So the thing that I'm aware of with this is if it was implemented in a graph neutral way, you've got the basis for a modern GRC platform that almost all of the current ones don't do.
Exactly.
And the intellectual property on it is basically sitting in an open standard.
Yeah, yeah. For me, this is the first GRC thing that I see that can actually scale, right? Because if it's not in a graph format, it would never scale. It would be a gigantic freaking spreadsheet.
But sorry, Denise, to Phil's point, is that not what we should be developing? Sorry, as being.
Sorry, we're breaking.
Yeah, you're breaking up.
Consistent with.
Alan, you need to repeat the last 20 seconds.
To Phil's. Yes, sorry, forgive me. Phil's point, though, developing here would be not just graph neutral, so also intellectual property. And to my understanding of what the Open Security Summit is about, it could lead to either or an existing vendor. So somewhere in there.
Oh, you're breaking a bit.
You're breaking a lot.
You want to stop your video, actually, Alan? Oh, we lost him.
Oh.
Alan.
That again.
He's dropped altogether.
And third time, I'm just.
Oh no. Okay.
Am I here? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Sorry, I think Phil's point there about the intellectual property piece of this is actually quite key, because with the collective develop this, that really ought to be in space, and we frankly keep control of taking it themselves and claiming it.
So if I'm understanding correctly, is you saying that the intellectual property case of this is very important, so it has to be open, and we have to be careful by a couple of vendors to take it and make it proprietary or make it very aligned to how they operate? Is that what you said?
Yeah, in short, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you publish under Creative Commons, then then we've locked it down.
Yeah. So the as it stands, it's under an open license. Anything we produce at the summit should go under an open license. Yeah. If vendors want to make an implementation, fantastic, but we shouldn't then lock it so that nobody else can.
And the thing about this, right? And I always found that in a real world, right, we will have, right, Petra will create our own version of this, right? Because there's a moment where you cross into the business, right? There's a moment where you're describing how we operate, right? But what I don't want is for that to be the full reinvention of the wheel. That should be the 2, 3, 4, 5%. And in fact, that should be done in a way that you can diff with the original one. And so that when the original one gets updated, we can go back to our graph, back to our playbook and saying, hey, they added 4 steps to it. They added these more things. Does that reflect to us? And what this allows is allows for the mothership, right, to be massive, because detail matters. But then I'll go to it and say, look, we don't have that. So those threads don't apply to us, right? But actually we have this, and this. So we take a subset. So the beauty of kind of the graph is that you start to choose the bits that you want out of it. But the more this is open, the more we can get peer-reviewed validation. And actually, I think will help a lot of security professionals, because sometimes the problem we have is also credibility, right? If we go there and says, I think we should do X, it's very different to say we should do X because I think X is a great way to do it, to say we should do X because the industry over there is all collaborating and thinks that that's how X should be done, right? Mm-hmm. So it actually provides a lot of weight to actually even new CISOs or new security professionals to know, which fights they should be buying and which fights they shouldn't be buying, because we can provide good playbooks, right? And good, examples of what should happen, right?
Could be just something to add. It may be less relevant, but I'll say it nonetheless. I'm a massive fan of bow ties, and it's a real shame that we don't see more of this type of practice with how we manage and measure risk. where it is, where Bowties are used heavily is in oil and gas and in health and safety. And where you say, you know, for credibility, bringing kind of more security professionals, it might be worth having conversations with, you know, practitioners that use bow ties as part of their risk practices on a more daily basis.
Yeah.
If only we had an event, right, that we could use, that we could bring people from multiple disciplines, right, to one place and collaborate, right? When that, but look, I think the summit is exactly that, right? The summit is like, absolutely, you know, reach out, like, and I actually feel that if going back, actually tying up with the whole skill, you know, skill shortages and more diverse in job opportunities, I feel that the way we get more talent into cybersecurity is by doing skills transfer. And I think the more we get people from other industries involved in cybersecurity, right, then they realize that the skills that they have there are completely applicable. And they realize how sometimes a bunch of cowboys, the whole cybersecurity is, right? And they can actually add a huge amount of value. This is a perfect example, right? We should be reaching out to those oil and industry and saying, hey, share with us how you think. And you might realize that maybe you should shift your career to cybersecurity because you can bring already so much more thinking and maturity to us that, you know, some of our areas we don't have.
I completely agree with that. Even engineering, it's, you know.
Well, look, you know, I'm going to bang again on Petra again, right? Oh, she comes from a medical industry, right? You can tell. You can tell that the way she thinks, the way she processes information, the way she responds to pressure, you know, she comes from a medical industry where she has that background of, you know, understanding concepts and putting them in a very effective way. So
that's diversity, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And say I work
definitely.
extensively with oil and gas at the moment, and although they use bow tie diagrams very well in the safety and critical engineering side, where I've seen it then tried to be applied into the cyber or information security side, it's gone horribly wrong.
That's the thing, right? Isn't it? That's the point. So what kind of guidance and wisdom should be drawn down from those that do it well to areas where it's kind of emerging?
Yeah, the last one I looked at, I think the bit that got close to bow tie was the triangles in the background.
Yeah. So that takes me really nice to the last slide of today, right? Which is basically, so after this session, well, so I think what we'll do is we now have some really good topics. So we'll create a first pass of those sessions and try to say, maybe put them on a schedule so we can start to pin them down. And then we come back to this group, right? And then, you know, we'll do another session next week. Yeah, there's 20th of May, right? Cool. And but the main thing also is like, think about what is the outcomes, think about what we should work, but also figure out who we need to be invited. And even if you just give us names, or
I've got some thoughts. I'm thinking of some people already actually who'd be good, you know, for this, different people, but who could really add to it, really add huge value in different parts of the world. Yeah.
Brilliant.
So how are we going to invite them? Are you happy to invite them, or do you want?
Yeah, I'm fine to just like say, come along to this. You know, hopefully, someone I'm thinking is in where is she? She's in Washington. I think she's Washington. Yeah.
So I actually maybe did that. One thing that we should do, let's just create a couple of slides or a couple of like how-tos, like how to help, how to invite, what's the next steps, the link to the Slack, the link to this, just to make everything easy. And maybe the hashtag and the stuff, right? Just to make it super easy for people that want to invite and reach out and we can, you know, invite them and make them feel welcome and help them as much as we can, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, you know, Adam, who's also here, is also, you know, available to help, right? He's also a resource that, you know, we can use for content creation, for following up stuff. He actually created a really nice video, which we're about to publish from Simon's session yesterday, which came out really well. So we, you know, during the session, Simon went on a really lovely tangent of explaining how events work and a worldly map of it. And I think is almost these amazing nuggets that we should be capturing and just breaking it down and just publishing individually, right? So it's really good.
Well done, and thank you, Adam.
Thank you so much.
Okay, any other comments and thoughts from you?
Wednesday, Thursday, usually good for everyone? For the actual summit.
Yeah, Wednesday's better than Thursday, but yeah, I'm
So
sure it'll be fine.
I guess my ask for you is, can you start to define which days or which hours, right, you could allocate to the summit, so we can start to put the schedule and the hours there, but also, you know, in a way, you know, advertise that the fact that, you know, you participating, because I think that again helps to draw more talent.
Dennis, an idea. What do you think about us reaching out to Matthew Skelton and Manuel Paes from Team Topology, see if they would be interested in doing the introduction?
I think you guys should not ask permission.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that in a minute.
Well, I love the fact that I actually want to have a shirt in work, and I say, you know what my answer is going to be, right? Because I still get asked these questions, and, you know, I think the number of times I say no, it's like, look, it's a good idea. Why would I say no to that, right? But I think that's beautiful. Look, to put it into perspective, at the summit in Portugal, the second one, we got John Wylander did an amazing thing where he got key representatives from the browsers to come together to participate in sessions on site. And these were the key individuals of the browser engines from, you know, Mozilla, from Firefox, from Safari, Opera, you know, IE. And some of those guys had written a book together, but they never met. So it was amazing. It was like watching these ninja guys, right? Like literally, not actually fighting, but like talking about stuff. And then you had the security professionals almost saying, why don't you do this? And it was amazing to see the collaboration between the security professionals that spend all their time breaking the browsers and the guys who develop the browsers, right? Actually working together. And I think that's the beauty of the summit. Like we should be able to get all that talent come together and those subject matter experts, and then, you know, create something amazing. Like I would love to get the people from Scrum, people from Worldly Maps, and people from Team Topologies, right, to come together, because that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to figure out how to mash up the three, right? And it would be amazing to actually get those individuals in the same place. So, big yes.
I'll do that.
Brilliant.
All right,
okay.
We're almost 5 minutes overrun. So, thank you all.
All right, and I see
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Have a good evening. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.